All right, part B. I think I said part 1 initially, and the other one I should have said part A. Part B, we're going to complete the square. I left a lot of notes before I started the video. They might be hard to read. I apologize. I wish I had a bigger whiteboard. There's a couple concepts here that we need to know. And the route we are going to follow is they're going to give us equations that don't involve a perfect square, that we can't factor out into a perfect square. This cannot factor out into a perfect square. So because we can't get a perfect square out of this, we need to make a perfect square. We're going to create a perfect square. How awesome is that? Oh, you are going to love it. We're going to take the second term. This is the key. And we're going to divide it by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. That's easy enough. Everybody can do that. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. Or 6 divided by 2 is 3. We take that 3 and square it and get 9. 9 is our magic number that we're going to use. Okay. That's what I set up here. Take the second term, whatever you have in there, divide by 2. Square that number, and the result is what we're going to add to both sides. So when we get this, I'll come back to it. It'll make sense once we've done this. When we don't have a perfect square, we need to isolate the variables. We need our x or y or z or t or q or p or whatever they give us on one side and our numbers on the other. So we have to begin by subtracting 5. That leaves us with x squared minus 6x equals negative 5. Okay, all I did was move. That's it. I moved things around. Now, what we're going to do, let me leave a space here. That might make more sense. I'm going to rewrite this with a space. I'm going to have to erase a whole bunch of stuff in a minute here. Minus 6x, then there's going to be something here, equals negative 5, and then something here. So what happens is I moved my number over. I added negative 5. There's my equals. I have x squared minus 6x. I'm going to make a perfect square. We do so by taking this, and I'll erase this in a minute. So keep track of this. Write it down, whatever you want to do if you're taking notes. I take 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So here's my new number that I'm dealing with. What do I do with that? Well, I square it. So I square that. I take the middle term. I divide by 2. Whatever my answer is, I square it. So my 3 will be gone. I'm only using that to figure out what my total number is. 3 squared is 9. Here's my new number. What I'm going to do with that is I am going to put that 9 here. 3 squared, 9, plus 9. I added 9 here. We're squaring, so of course it's plus. I added 9 here. That means I have to add 9 over here. So here's the big step to get us started. Once we get our x's, or our variables on one side, our numbers on the other, then we make a perfect square. I half this because with a perfect square, you know that you have a number times a number. Well, the answer is, well, in this case 9, but that number times a number added together has to be our perfect square. So if we half that middle term, we have half here, we're going to add them together. That's why we can take half of this and square it. That probably made no sense how I explained it, but I'm trying. I'm trying on the videos here. I do better in class with my students. So I'll keep this piece down here for now so that we can make sense of it. So what I have is x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals negative 5 plus 9, so equals 4. Okay, now I am back to part A that we talked about a little bit ago. Now, when I look at this, I already know. Well, no, sorry. I already know that I can factor this out. to a perfect square. And I have a positive 9 and a negative 6. And what I should have done is kept my negative in here. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. That's more accurate. I was focused on the 9. We have a negative 6. So we have a negative. We have an x minus 3 times an x minus 3. We have an x squared minus 6x plus 9. So all I did was rearrange. You know that x minus 3 times x minus 3 equals x squared minus 3x minus 3x is minus 6x. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. That's our x minus 3 squared. So basically, I'm going to spend more time on this one. We'll go through the other ones quicker. I have a negative 6. I divide by 2. I get a negative 3. I know that negative 3 squared equals 9. I know 9 is the number I'm adding. Once you catch on to this, once it makes sense, when you get your negative 3, you can automatically write x minus 3 squared and then take your 9 and add it to the number you had. You don't have to write every step down. You know when you divide, if it's a negative 6, you know you're going to have x minus 3 squared on one side. You just know it. All that matters is figuring out what that squared is and adding it to the other side. Okay, so x minus 3 squared equals 4. Again, I take, now I'm off and running. Completing the square is just, this is the step, or steps I should say. Here's the steps they're adding. Now we're back. Once we get here, we are right back to the beginning, to just squaring both, taking the square root of both sides. So the key with this second video is catching on to that whole completing the square idea. Get the variables on one side, numbers on the other, half the middle term. That's your x or y, that's your variable, plus or minus squared. And then what that is squared, square that term and add it, and it gives you your result on the other side. Now we're back to what we talked about earlier in the first video. So when I take the square root of a square, I'm left with the radicand, x minus 3. I have plus or minus 2 because square root of 4 is a perfect square. Now I have x equals, I've got to move that 3. X equals 3 plus or minus 2. Well, that means I have x equals 3 plus 2 is 5. X equals 3 minus 2 is 1. There's my two answers. Let's do another one. Oh good, we'll do example 5 and 6, and they involve fractions, and I know you all love fractions. So you're going to love these. I'm going to erase this, pause it, write it down, whatever you need to do, so that we can move on. I'll clean the board again before the next video. Okay, so example 5. They give us x squared plus 5x minus 2 equals 0. Okay. I'm going to keep fractions. When I get a fraction, I'm going to keep it as a fraction because it's easier to deal with fractions when you are taking square roots or squaring. So, first step, I need to add my 2. I need to get rid of that. So I have x squared plus 5x equals 2. There's my new equation. Okay, I need to take half of that. When I take half of it, well, that's what I'm going to leave. I'm going to have 5 halves. It's a positive 5, I have positive 5 halves. I know right away that's my left side. Half of that, that's my left side. Well, when I square it, I get 25/4. That's the number I'm adding over here. So I'm going to take an extra step though. I'm going to take my 25/4 and I'm going to add my 2 that I have. Well, to make 2 out of 4, whoops, to make this work, I need fourths, so I can add everything together. 2 becomes 8/4. I'm not going to go through that. Hopefully you already understand that. So my 2 is 8/4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. I'm going to add that to 25/4. Yeah, we're keeping fraction form, but you'll see why. Well, I'll just combine it. I'll combine it right here. So we have 33/4. 33/4. When I take the square root, I'm just going to write this in real quick. When I take the square root, I know that I have x plus 5/2 equals square root of 33/4, plus or minus. Okay, so plus 5/2 plus or minus 33/4. So what I have to do is solve for my x. So I have to move negative 5/2 plus or minus square root of 33/4. Well, my square root of 33/4, whoops, I don't know why I put my equals instead of plus or minus. Plus or minus square root of 33/2. This is how we get to combine. I know a lot of students will get to this point. They'll look in the back of the book and ask, why doesn't my answer match up? Well, square root, remember, square root of 33/4. Square root of 33/4 is square root of 33 over square root of 4. You can always break those down. There is a square root of 4, it's 2. What we see now is the same denominator. Since the denominator is the same, we have a negative 5 plus or minus square root of 33 all over 2. There's my x. Let's do one more, I think. Yeah, example 6 will be the example 6 will be the last one before we move to 7-2. Like always, post in the discussion forum if you have any questions. And I'll do my best to work them out. Possibly in video form. If not, I'll work it out on paper and send a picture. So example 6, last one we're going to do, solve for x. Now they just give us a leading coefficient in front of the x, minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. And I divide by 3 right off the bat. So we need to get rid of this. We want an x squared to make our factoring easier. So I'm going to divide everything by 3. Again, I'm leaving fractions. I would rather square fractions. I would rather take square roots of fractions because I'm dealing with numbers, not decimals. So when I divide, I'm left with x squared minus 8/3 x plus 7/3 equals 0. So I have x squared minus 8/3 x equals negative 7/3. Now, my middle term is negative 8/3. When I take a half of that, I divide by 2, which means I multiply by a half. So I'm multiplying by 1/2. It gives me 8/6, or if you cross cancel, 4/3. Negative, obviously. So negative 4/3. So my half is that, negative 4/3. Then I take my negative 4/3 and I square it, and I get 16/9. So I know, I'm going to do it in red here so we can follow along. I know that I'm adding 16/9 to -7/3. I also know that to make this out of a 9th so I can combine, I just multiply by 3. And I get -21/9. So what I really have is -21/9 plus 16/9 on this side. -21/9 plus 16/9. So I have -5/9. All right, so with -5/9, now I know that I'm taking the, well, I'll do it in red. I'm taking the square root of both sides. I have a negative. You can pull that out whenever you want. You can pull the I out. So I have x minus 4/3 equals plus or minus, I'm going to pull it out right now so I don't forget. My negative, I pull out as I. And I have square root of 5/9. All right, hopefully we're following along okay. You don't have to take this many steps when you're doing it on your own. I'm trying to show everything that we've got to do with the fractions. So I have x minus 4/3 equals plus or minus I square root of 5/9. I'm just breaking this one down for now. Let's break it down one more. I have plus or minus I square root of 5/3. Square root of 9 is 3. Again, you can look at this as square root of 5/square root of 9. So I have plus or minus I square root of 5 divided by 3, and I have this piece. I'm going to write it up here. X minus 4/3 equals plus or minus I times the square root of 5/3. I like it because I have a 3 and a 3. That's going to be easy to combine. So to get rid of this, I might as well use red. This is our last example. I'll clean the board later. I'm going to add my 4/3. Again, this is why I keep the fractions, because I can add the numbers. I can take a square root of 3 or of 9 and get 3 and leave my square root of 5. It's just easier in the long run to deal with fractions in this case. So I have, one extra step. I'll take it. I have my 4/3 plus or minus I square root of 5/3. 3 and 3, I can combine those. X equals 4 plus or minus I times the square root of 5. All that over 3. There's my ultimate answer. X equals 4 plus or minus I times the square root of 5/3. I got there by having the middle term, 8/3. Whenever we have a leading coefficient here, just divide by 3 and make it easier to figure out that perfect square. So 8/3. 8/3, just take half of it, times it by half. That's easy enough. You get 8/6, or you divide and get 4/3, and then you're dealing with that 4/3. Square it to get your 16/9 and just change your fractions. There's not big changes. You should never have anything too wacky in our problem sets to work on. All right, hope you had fun with that. I will see you in a little bit for section 7-2. These are going to all probably be split into a couple videos. All right, hope you have fun with it.